A richly dressed young man enters the room. His beautiful wife meets him at home. She asks how her husband's day went. The man replies that he is tired and goes off to sleep in another room, indifferently walking past his wife, not paying any attention to her. You can smell fresh grass coming from him. He was with his mistress again. The main character says that she needs to talk about something important. But the husband doesn't want to hear anything. He's tired, and his wife's voice is ringing in his ears. Leaving for his room, he asks the girl not to disturb him. The wife is clearly unhappy. She wanted to discuss their divorce with her boyfriend. Not wanting to tolerate such treatment, she, despite the protests of the maids, bursts into his room and announces her desire for a divorce. The main character was reborn in the body of Malena Creedwell from the Manhwa melting image of Aquamarine. Her character was intended to be a wife of convenience, from whom the main character must leave for his true love. Born into the family of the wealthy Marquis of Lusum, Malena demanded to marry Oscar. Despite her family's reputation and her father's protests, Malena inherited her father's stubbornness and therefore did whatever she wanted. The girl's father called her to him for a final conversation. He set a condition for his daughter. Either she refuses a marriage of convenience with a man who does not love her, or she ceases to be part of the Laws family, and not a penny of their fortune will go to her. Much to the Marquise's surprise, Malena chooses to marry Oscar without any doubts, believing that they will get along and fall in love with each other. Respecting his daughter's final choice, the man asked Oscar Creedwell to marry his daughter. Having lost her family's favor, Malena found herself a husband and took his last name. That would be the end of the story if she were the main character. However, she was destined to be the villain who prevents her husband and his mistress from achieving true love. Immediately after marriage, he began dating Serena. However, their relationship was also far from normal. Oscar locked the girl in some shack and visited her regularly. The main character of our story, who was destined to become Malena, clearly did not like this story. She could not understand how a story about people cheating on each other could get to the top of the ratings. The only joy was to read and laugh at the comments to each chapter. But Malena, obsessed with Oscar, was not without flaws. Having learned that her husband was cheating on her with his mistress and wanted a divorce, she tried to attack and maim Serena. Everything would have worked out if Oscar had not stood up for his beloved. The story ended with the main character, Serena, closing herself off after a traumatic experience, and the main character, Oscar, realizing how much he loved her. After that, the author of the manhwa stopped posting sequels due to illness. Finding herself in Malena's body, the girl initially thought to play along with the plot and wait until Oscar himself asked for a divorce. However, realizing that she would not get anything from him, she herself burst into his chambers. Having learned of her demand for a divorce, her husband only laughs at Malena. Left without her parental inheritance, she will not be able to pay the alimony due to him by law. However, the main character only smirks in response. He will have to pay for the maintenance of his ex. Without any embarrassment, she openly hints to her husband about Serena, his mistress. Realizing that this is a scandal, the maid observing this immediately asks the servants to urgently leave the Duke's chambers. The wife sets a condition for Oscar. She will not tell anyone about her unfaithful husband's extramarital affair if he initiates the divorce proceedings. The guy looks at Malena in shock. Is this really the same girl in front of him who once groveled before him everywhere and couldn't imagine life without him? Despite the rumors about Malena, Oscar's reputation improved after their wedding. Even those who led a dissolute lifestyle admired how the bride agreed to give up her fortune for love. If society finds out that he is cheating on such a girl with some slave, and also being connected with the theatrical sphere, his reputation will come to an end. Oscar can't let Malena destroy everything he's worked so hard to build over the years. Seeing the confusion on his face, the main character gives him time to think about her proposal. The man thinks that this is all a cunning plan to force him to be faithful because the previous Malena was ready to fall prostrate before him just to share a bed with him. Oscar decides to court his wife, even though she is disgusting to him, because Malena wanted it so much. He confidently approaches her for a kiss, but the girl only pushes him away. The wife is offended. She really only wants a divorce and finds attempts to kiss her disgusting. Not wanting to stay in the same room with him any longer, the girl leaves and closes the door behind her. She still can't believe that Oscar tried to kiss her when he mentioned Serena. Perhaps the old Malena would have tolerated this kind of treatment, but not our main character. The original story has already been disrupted anyway. If everything had been as before, Malena, left without the support of her family, would have ended her life in poverty. Therefore, she did not consider the option of divorce. The main character, however, has an ace up her sleeve in the form of a distant relative, Duke Balthus. Members of his family, including Malena's mother, were known for their poor health. Having learned of his fatal illness, and having no children or close relatives, he decides to write to his distant niece asking to meet her. Being a compassionate girl, the main character, secretly from Oscar, begins to visit her uncle. She discovers that Duke Balthus is a very kind and pleasant man. They talked a lot to each other and danced waltzes to pass the time, and when he lost his sight, Malena read books to him. Although Malena has a half-brother, they have never been close. As the heir to the Laws family, he is constantly busy preparing to become the head of the family. Before his death, Duke Balthus, who had become sincerely attached to his niece, who had responded to his letter, bequeathed his title and inheritance to Malena. Now, if she divorces Oscar, the main character will not end up in poverty and will become Duchess Malena Balthus. If the husband had known about the huge inheritance left to her by her uncle, he would never have asked for a divorce. Fortunately, Oscar never took an interest in his wife's affairs. Since Malena has not yet officially entered into the inheritance, even if she has to ask for a divorce first, she will be able to pay alimony with the precious jewelry that remains with her. Remembering her uncle, she becomes sad. He was the first friend in this world, and she would give everything she has if only he would stay alive. However, in his farewell letter, he asked his niece not to be sad about his death and to live happily. Malena is planning to force her husband to file for divorce. Soon Oscar invites the main character to dinner. There is no one in the dining room except them and the only servant. The man admits that he was a bad husband and wants to fix everything. But she only deliberately mocks him. She does not want to live with a traitor, and one who is stupid enough to reveal his affair on the side. Beside himself with indignation, having succumbed to a cunning provocation, Oscar demands that his wife take back her words about him. But she just keeps smirking, pressing on his weak spots. Who else? But the person who betrayed the trust of his other half dares not talk about trust between spouses. The main character, who had previously read the manhwa, tells Oscar the address where Serena is, asking what the reporters will say if they see him trying to hide his mistress. Having lost patience, the man agrees to initiate a divorce, claiming that it will not be difficult for him to earn money to pay for the maintenance of his ex-wife. Threatening her with his connections, Oscar intimidates his wife by saying that if she divorces him, she will no longer be able to live in this city. She will become an outcast among other nobles. Being a theater school graduate with a talent for improvisation in a past life, the main character has no trouble showing shock on her face and crying. Pretending to regret her actions, Malena tries to dissuade Oscar, but he, having fallen for her hook, only laughs in her face. There is no turning back. With these words, he demonstratively leaves the dining room, leaving behind the girl crying and begging him to change his mind. Returning to his office, Oscar reflects on what happened. What struck him most was that Malena knew Serena's location. The latter would have to be hidden somewhere else. The man picks up the phone and calls Albert, the servant who stayed with his wife in the dining room. He reports that after the master left, the girl cried and begged him to reason with Oscar. The smug husband orders the servant to prepare the divorce papers as quickly as possible and invite Malena to work. The Grand Theater of Cridwell is the main attraction of the city. The performances there are always sold out. It is not surprising that everyone who finds themselves in the capital by the will of fate strives to get a job in this theater. The main character was an actress in her past life and always dreamed of becoming part of a theater troupe. Having become Malena, the girl first asked her husband to allow him to be an actress, but he just waved her off. Having become a free woman after a divorce, the main character intends to fulfill her dream at all costs. As stated, she came to Oscar to work at the theater. The employee who met her was clearly surprised by the appearance of his wife. Apparently, she had previously been an infrequent guest at her husband's work. With a look of excitement on her face, Malena says that the Duke himself invited her here for a very important matter. The young man working at the theater finds it hard to believe, but the deputy comes to the rescue and kindly takes the Duchess to her husband's office. Once in his office, she studies the document in front of her with trembling hands. Oscar sarcastically notes that the girl, unbecoming a duchess, went out into society without gloves. Without wasting any time, the man throws her a pen. He has already filled everything out. The girl only has to sign. The main character, playing a role, once again asks Oscar to change his mind, but he, after waiting for her signature, only tears the sheet of paper out of her hands. For the sake of credibility, Malena is trying to delay the inevitable. After all, they need to pay the divorce fee, and she doesn't have that kind of money. But Oscar just smirks. He's a rich man. It costs him nothing to pay for the design. He'll even be happy to pay for it. While the couple is still leaving the office, the Duke calls his deputy and in a commanding tone demands that these papers be taken to the department as quickly as possible. The employee tries to object. The working day will soon be over, but the theater owner only rudely interrupts him. Malena cannot believe that Oscar allows himself to speak to his subordinates in such a tone. As the deputy leaves, the Duke openly laughs at his wife. In 3 days, she will no longer be the Duchess of Creedwell. Malena cannot believe that the main character of a manhwa can be such a villain. Theatrically crying, the girl tells Oscar that he will regret the divorce, after which she runs out of the theater in tears. Once outside, her tears instantly disappear. In anticipation, the main character makes plans on how to usefully spend her last 3 days as a duchess. The first thing she does is go to the bank. She will soon come into an inheritance and needs to rent a safe deposit box in advance. Moreover, with a sly smile, she takes out a loan in her husband's surname. A bank employee offers Malena to take out an urgent loan at a high interest rate. In this case, she does not have to wait for confirmation from her husband. The girl agrees and asks to give her the maximum possible amount. While the employee is applying for a loan, another bank employee takes her to a safe deposit box. The main character puts Duke Balthus's will there, as well as some of her jewelry and ornaments, so as not to draw attention to the box with the document inside. She is informed that she must come for the contents of the safe within a week, otherwise it will be destroyed. Having received a suitcase containing 50 million akrons, Malena leaves the bank satisfied. Duke Balthus's house, although located in the capital, has long been empty and has probably fallen into disrepair. Although the girl took out a loan, it will only last for a week. She will have to think about where to get money to maintain the mansion. In anticipation of the divorce, Malena feels a pleasant excitement. For the first time in her entire existence in this world, she will be able to live freely. Malena was the mistress of the Cridwell house only nominally. In fact, it was Albert who ran it. Oscar gave the girl a small amount for maintenance. She tried and saved on everything to buy an outfit with this money, wanting to be beautiful for her husband, but he only criticized her, cheating on her with his mistress. Having entered Malena's body, the main character immediately asked her husband for permission to go to work so that she could provide for herself independently, but she received a harsh refusal. In the eyes of other nobles, Oscar would be considered a failed nobleman and a pathetic loser if his wife worked. Meanwhile, the husband, without any ulterior motive, was already choosing a new place on the map where he could hide Serena. Suddenly, the phone rings. The bank director, Mr. Lowell, decides to inform Duke Cridwell that his wife has just taken out an urgent loan in his name for 50 million acres. Oscar is shocked. He asks his interlocutor why a stranger was allowed to take out a loan in his name without his consent. Lowell explains that under the laws of the kingdom, spouses are one legal entity. In addition, urgent loans are issued for smaller amounts, and they do not require the consent of the second partner. Holding the phone to his ear, the man realizes that his stupid Malena had carefully planned everything in advance. The bank director explains to the Duke that although Oscar has forbidden Malena access to the family's savings account, this rule does not apply to loans. The man is outraged by this answer. How can anyone trust money to a bank if there is no guarantee that the money will be safe? Lowell asks him to calm down and replies that it is nonsense to forbid his wife from using the family finances, and the director has done him a great favor by fulfilling such a request. Oscar loses his composure and demands the director to admit that the reason for this attitude is that he is connected with the theater. The thing is, Oscar's grandfather, the first Duke of Cridwell, was the late king's younger brother. The Cridwells would have been the most powerful duchy in the entire kingdom of Arlo. However, fearing possible attempts at usurpation, the king forbade his brother's heirs from engaging in politics and taking up positions in the government. And although the theater founded by Kieran Creedwell, Oscar's father, became the beginning of a thriving business that brought them fame, their family has no influence on the course of life in the country. Lowell bids Oscar farewell, saying he will no longer make concessions for him. The man realizes that he, like other noble families, looks down on Creedwell. The director hangs up, shocked by Oscar's indignation over some 50 million acres. The Duke realizes that he has lost an important man because of his intemperance. Meanwhile, Malena sips tea and thinks with a smile that her husband has probably already found out about her loan and is beside himself with anger. Oscar has no choice but to pay it off as quickly as possible, otherwise he will have to pay a large percentage of the loan. The girl decides to live her life to her heart's content with the money she received and go shopping. A luxurious carriage from the Redlawn Company soon arrives for her. The coachman asks if Malena would mind if they took a shortcut through the alleys. A dangerous gang of Scarlet Ravens has recently been operating in the kingdom. So many nobles avoid the deserted streets. Deciding that in a luxurious carriage equipped with the latest technology, including a direct line to security, she will have nothing to fear, Malena agrees. The carriage passes the street where Serena lived. The main character does not hide her curiosity. She would like to take a look at that very beautiful commoner who managed to take away her husband. From the carriage window, she notices a suspicious young man. Despite his worn cloak, he has a real sword on his belt and a purse made of pure silk in his hand. To her horror, the young man was surrounded by strangers, and it looked like a fight could not be avoided. Malena orders the driver to stop. They call the guards, she reports a fight and gives the address. They promise to arrive within 5 minutes. However, not a second passes before the Duchess, worried about the stranger's life, gasps loudly. The young man stands unharmed, while his offenders lie powerless on the ground at his feet. She hurries out of the carriage to help the young man, but he falls to his knees in front of her, exhausted. The expression on his face changes, and the menacing stranger, who managed to defeat 3 people at once, asks her not to give him away. The girl doesn't have time to ask or find out anything before he falls into her arms unconscious. The girl tells the guards who arrived at the scene that strangers attacked her carriage. However, the guard taking the testimony expresses doubt. Such petty thieves usually avoid expensive carriages. Malena reproaches the law enforcement officer for questioning her words, and he immediately apologizes, since the Duchess has a reputation for being a very quarrelsome person. The main character asks the young man to look at the portraits of the criminals who are currently wanted, arguing that she allegedly saw a strange man among the attackers. In fact, she wants to make sure that the young man she saved is not one of them. The guard asks Malena to go with him to the station and testify as a witness, but she refuses, but promises to come tomorrow morning. Again, due to the bad reputation of her character, such an answer suits the young man. Left alone, the Duchess bribes the coachman so that he will not tell anyone about the young man. Meanwhile, the young man is still unconscious in the carriage. Malena asks the driver to take her for a ride around the central square. While they were driving, the girl first tied up the stranger so that he could not escape or harm her when he woke up. Examining the young man, the main character concludes that he is from a noble family. Despite the fact that his clothes are dirty and smell bad, they are made of expensive fabrics and even have patterns inside the sleeves. Remembering his sword, the Duchess tries to look at the coat of arms on the hilt in the form of the eye of some beast, but it doesn't tell her anything. In his wallet, she finds a notebook and several glass bottles with medicines. No one in the capital makes such fancy ones, so the young man is clearly not a local. In the notebook, she finds only a reminder that he needs to take medication when he starts to feel unwell, but not to forget about the side effects. Malena comes to the conclusion that the guy was probably under the influence of medication, and that is why he looked so bad. Meanwhile, a curious Serena goes outside to see what all the fuss is about. She finds a beautiful locket on the side of the road. Deciding that the jewelry would look good on her, she pockets it for herself since the owner has not yet returned for it. Having hidden the medallion, the girl quickly returns to the house, afraid that Oscar might see her. Sitting on the bed, she sighs sadly. Her beloved has not visited her for a long time and has not let her know about himself. Meanwhile, her lover is more concerned about the loan taken by Malena. He again tries to dispute it with the bank employees over the phone, but they do not see any violations in the Duchess's actions. The conversation reaches a dead end, and Oscar promises to repay the loan as quickly as possible. Melena's actions, having previously fled the mansion with nothing but her jewelry, infuriate him. He promises to give her a dressing down the next time he sees her. Suddenly, another phone ringing. Picking up the phone, the speaker inquires about the progress of the Duke's mission to find the Archduke's nephew. Oscar recognizes the voice of the leader of the Scarlet Ravens, Adam, and the latter addresses him by his code name, Orchid. Adam asks why the search is taking so long, emphasizing that he is calling him personally about this issue. The leader of the Scarlet Crows also reminds us of the reward in the form of glory that will go to Oscar. The Duke hopes that by helping the Scarlet Crows, he will be able to win a seat in the Senate for himself. Adam himself called him one day, introducing himself as the leader of a criminal group and giving Oscar a code name. The mysterious man gave the Duke a task, to find a young man from the neighboring principality of Roheitum. The fugitive, Ludwig Roheitum, is the son of the former Archduke Wilhelm and the nephew of the current Archduke Rudolf. Adam told Oscar that Ludwig had killed his father in an attempt to take the throne and then fled to Arno. Since there was no direct evidence yet, the leader of the Scarlet Ravens tasked the Duke to find him. The man, however, himself understands that there are many inconsistencies in Adam's story. Why kill the Archduke for the throne, and then flee without claiming the throne, especially if the authorities have no evidence of his guilt? The stranger promised the Duke that Archduke Rudolf, being deeply indebted to Oscar, would certainly help him become a member of the Senate. However, the Duke aims higher. If he manages to get into the Senate and, with the support of the Scarlet Ravens, kill the Crown Prince, then he will eventually be able to ascend to the throne by right of royal blood. Oscar tells Adam that he will involve journalists in this case. The leader of the crime syndicate reminds that although the fugitive may have dyed his hair blonde, his lilac eyes will give him away. Having finished the conversation, the Duke calls the theater's deputy and asks to free up the schedule of the leading actress, Nina Ford. He also informs his subordinate that he has invited reporters from several newspapers and magazines for tomorrow, and that Nina and the dancers should practice spring lilac flowers. Finally, Oscar asks to keep an eye on his still wife. Meanwhile, Milena is wondering what to do with the rescued stranger in the carriage because she has so many things to do and plans. The girl decides that she will shelter him for a few days, give him money for the journey, and then they will go their separate ways. She gives the order to the coachman to go to an inn called Sol. Soon the young man comes to his senses. He cannot understand where he is, and everything is swimming before his eyes. Seeing his reflection in the mirror, he cannot recognize it, although he understands that he sees himself. The young man tries to remember who he is and where he was going. Scattered, fuzzy memories come to mind of someone screaming and him running away on horseback. The last thing he remembers is a beautiful red-haired stranger. Suddenly, the door to the room opens. The guy reflexively jumps on the person who entered, who turns out to be that same girl. Getting to her feet, Milena cannot understand why he is trying to attack the man who saved his life. The Duchess says she didn't want to disturb him, but she heard a noise coming from the room and decided to check. Seeing that the guy doesn't look well, she pours him a mug of water. Drinking water, the young man thinks that the girl seems nice, especially if she really saved his life, and the glass of water cleared up some things in his head. The young man defeated the people who surrounded him on the street, thinking that they were subordinates of a certain man. However, he was wrong. Their close combat skills were weak enough to work for him. The boy cannot remember who he is, but he knows that he must be wary of him, otherwise he will kill him. The young man remembers that he cannot die because he is the only one. Clutching his head, the boy groans from the pain of the memories that have flooded in. Seeing his suffering, Milena asks him to distract himself and try not to think about anything. The main character explains that the young man himself asked to save him, and she could not do otherwise. After these words, the girl leaves the room, ordering the stranger to wait for her. The young man obediently sits down on the bed. Soon she returns, holding his things in her hands. The main character apologizes, immediately admitting that she rummaged through his things, trying to figure out who he is. The Duchess hands him the sword. Perhaps seeing the coat of arms will help him remember something, but the guy just shakes his head. He can't remember anything even when he sees the medicine bottles he had with him. The only thing he remembers is Malena. Not knowing his name or origin, tears come to the eyes of the young man. He asks for forgiveness from the girl. The latter immediately takes out a handkerchief, wiping away his tears. The Duchess asks the young man not to apologize and to take care of his sword like the apple of his eye. He will be identified by it. Malena says that she has paid for the guy's accommodation and food for several days. Having wished the stranger good night, she is about to leave when the young man calls out to her. He sincerely thanks her for her help, a blush playing across his face. Unexpectedly for herself, she discovers that she is pleased that finally someone treats her like a person, unlike Oscar. The next morning, Malena comes to visit the young man again. This time, he does not attack her. They both feel contented and well-rested. The girl notices that the guy has a travel package at his feet. He is getting ready to leave with her. The main character tries to explain to the young man that she is leaving without him, and he can stay and live in the tavern for a few more days. Before leaving, she gives him money, which should be enough for a few days. The young man tries to leave with her, but she explains that she is not able to take him with her now. Holding the money given to him by Malena, the young man cries. The girl asks him to rest while he has the chance. Passing by the innkeeper, who has already called a carriage for the Duchess, Malena asks him to take care of the guest from room 304. She is afraid to leave the man who so easily trusted the first person he met alone, but she cannot take responsibility. Without turning around, she gets into the carriage. She asks the coachman to take her to the police station. Thanks to her bad reputation, Malena quickly finishes giving evidence, answering questions with feigned reluctance. The girl is glad that at least she has finished with urgent matters for the day. However, when she goes out into the street, she unexpectedly encounters again the young man she saved. Although he tries to lie that he did not pursue her, he still admits that he heard the address from his room where she was heading and followed her. Moreover, the guy was unconscious the entire way to the station. He doesn't even remember how he managed to get there. The young man apologizes for his attachment. Malena is the only person he knows now. The Duchess is not offended but asks him to return to the tavern because he needs to regain his strength. But more than that, the young man is trying to return the money she gave him for living expenses. Oscar was watching all this from the side. Approaching the couple, he sarcastically tells Malena that she is using his money for charity. The main character finds her husband extremely unpleasant. She asks him to get out. He replies that as soon as he filed for divorce, the smile immediately disappeared from the girl's face. Oscar tries to reproach her for wasting money and for taking a loan in his name without asking, but Malena replies that if he is so sorry for the money, he can deduct it from the amount of alimony for her maintenance. Taking advantage of the fact that they are in a public place, the main character again reminds Oscar of his mistress. Hearing Serena's name, his face takes on a sinister expression. However, the man considers himself to be right in this conflict, and therefore, roughly grabbing Malena by the wrist, tries to take her back home, where she will answer for everything she has done. The girl is scared, because if he locks her in the estate, the will left in the bank safe will be destroyed after a period of time. Everything would have ended badly if the young man saved by Malena had not entered the conflict between the spouses. He stops Oscar, seeing that his savior does not want to go anywhere with him. Apparently mistaking the boy for a poor commoner, the Duke orders him to get away, or better yet, to take him to his master. Realizing that she had to somehow save the stranger, the main character, without further delay, answered her husband. This, as he put it, beggar, is her personal bodyguard. The Duke, who did not expect such a turn of events, was outraged that her bodyguard was behaving so rudely with the nobles. Malena just figuratively shrugged. If you don't like it, we can always go to the guards and sort it out. The girl knows that Oscar values his reputation and won't do something like that. The husband again tries to return the dialogue to the loan that Malena took out, but she reminds him that it all started with him taking a mistress. By the way, the main character notices that her bodyguard's ears have turned pink. Apparently, he is flattered that the lady stood up for him and called him her bodyguard. Realizing that nothing will work out for him, Oscar leaves, justifying himself by saying that he has an important meeting soon and does not want to waste time. Left alone, Malena grabs the young man by the hand and leads him into an alley where no one can see them. She scolds him for behaving so unwisely and for possibly putting himself in danger by conflicting with her husband. But seeing his upset face, Malena thanks him with a smile for his help and replies that she is glad that he ended up here after all. Feeling relieved, since he was able to, in essence, thank the girl for saving him, the young man remembers that he was going to return the money to her. Having returned them to Malena, the guy was about to leave when the Duchess called out to him. Deciding that she can't leave him alone and he needs help, the main character says that she really does need a bodyguard. Back in his office, Oscar can only roll his eyes in irritation. The deputy told her about Malena's location, but the Duke clearly didn't expect that there would be some beggar next to her. If he had the support of the Scarlet Ravens, he could have dealt with his wife in no time. But to do that, he had to complete the assigned task. Oscar calls his deputy and asks him to invite Nina Ford, who is already waiting for him in the corridor. A beautiful blonde enters the room. She greets her boss with a smile. Nina is the prima donna of the theater. Tickets for performances with her are sold out like hot cakes, but this popularity is entirely due to Oscar. He angrily scolds the girl for her provocative makeup. She suggests that they step away and wash it off, but the man replies that there is no time for that. Before Nina, the diva was the fiery brunette Katarina Blanche, but she refused to dance to Oscar's tune, replying that she only performs roles when she is on stage. By the standards of her contemporaries, Katarina had amazing singing, acting, and dancing skills, but her principals let her down. She refused to entertain wealthy guests at private evenings. Nina began to get leading roles, while Katarina did not get any. Soon she had to leave the theater. Oscar does not understand how Katarina could refuse him. After all, it was thanks to him that she was able to become a famous actress. The deputy reports that the journalists have already arrived. 2 reporters from the Eloise Daily newspaper, Ruben and a new intern, Edward, enter the room. The latter is positively impressed by the Duke's friendliness and hospitality. Moreover, he is amazed that Nina Ford is present in the room with them. Looking at her, Edward thinks about how much money it costs to be so close to the capital's first beauty. Oscar, meanwhile, places a tin cookie box on the table and hands it to the journalists. The intern is mentally puzzled by this gesture, while Ruben breaks into a smile. With a look of disappointment on his face, the Duke confesses to reporters that Hennessy has written a new play, but they have been unable to find a suitable actor for the lead role. The journalist enthusiastically asks who he is considering as a contender. Oscar gives a simple description: blonde hair and violet eyes. Ruben doubts. Finding a person with violet eyes in the kingdom is not an easy task, but the theater director justifies himself by saying that the future star of the theater is not just anyone. Much to the intern's surprise, his mentor happily offers to help with the search using his connections and contact database. The Duke is glad that Adam's task is practically done. Finally, he tells the journalists the news. He has filed for divorce from Malena, saying that he can no longer tolerate her bad character. Edward doesn't believe that she could agree so easily, but Oscar counters the remark by saying that he has nothing to hide and he tells everything as it really is. In addition, the wife allegedly threatened him that she would do anything to ruin her husband's life. In a conspiratorial tone, Oscar asks the journalists to be on their guard because Malena has money at stake and she will probably try to spread all sorts of dirty rumors about him. A confused Edward watches as Ruben, citing some journalistic ethics, replies that the newspaper will not publish any statements from Malena. Having finished the negotiations, Oscar asks Nina to sing for the guests one last time. Taking the box of cookies with them, Ruben and Edward leave. The Duke personally escorts them to the carriage. Once inside, Edward again brings up the subject of the Creedwells' impending divorce. He thinks it's wrong that they so easily believed one side and didn't do their own investigation. Ruben interrupts the newcomer and admits that their field is corrupt. Otherwise, why would they come to the director in person? He asks Edward to open the box next to him. Among the cookies of various shapes and sizes, the intern discovers a huge, shining bar of pure gold. The experienced reporter warns Edward not to do anything stupid, otherwise they will not receive such treats from the Duke again. And listening to Nina Forda sing is a reward in itself. The intern has a complex face, expressing both disappointment and fear. He does not understand what is happening and considers it abnormal, but he can do nothing. Meanwhile, Milena and her new bodyguard go to a restaurant because the girl's charges must be well-fed and well-fed. The main character is once again convinced of the noble origin of the young man. Even having lost his memory, he observes all the manners and rules of etiquette at the table. However, she decides to behave with him as usual, otherwise it could arouse suspicion among those around her. Milena asks the guy if he could not remember his name. After a few seconds of thought, he only remembers with great difficulty that it began with the letter L, after which he painfully clutches his head. After some thought, Milena decides to give the boy a name herself. The first option she suggests is the name Losha. Without even having time to add that he can offer his own option, the guy unconditionally agrees to the new name. With a beaming smile, he thanks Milena. She melts again, this time because for the first time in all this time, someone has sincerely thanked her. At this time, a waitress comes to the table with an order. Upon seeing her, the main character is speechless. Their table is being served by Katerina Blanche herself. She looks sadly after her. The Duchess has heard that the rising star, Nina Ford, is playing the leading roles in the theater, but the girl finds it hard to believe that Katerina is now working as a waitress. Could Oscar really kick such a talented actress out of his theater? However, when asked by the bodyguard, she tells Lasha that she doesn't know this girl. 2 days later, Milena tries to contact the newspaper editors and tell them about the divorce. Much to her surprise, the newspaper employee apologizes and says that there is no room for her story in the paper. Loshe has no doubt that the fifth refusal is the work of her ex-husband. Earlier, Milena had already managed to inherit her uncle's estate and became Duchess of Balthus. The first thing she did was provide Loshe with everything he needed, including fine clothing. They decided to put his sword in a safe deposit box for a year. Walking around with it on the streets, the bodyguard would only attract unnecessary attention. The main character also started renovating her uncle's mansion. All that was left was to tell the others about her new status and the divorce. However, it appears that Oscar has taken control of the media, not wanting the public to know about Serena. Even though she was angry, Milena had another plan on how to do this. A social event is taking place. The dignitaries eagerly discuss the latest fresh news, the divorce of the Cridwells. Since Oscar was the initiator, everyone attributes the divorce to Milena's difficult character. The Duke, eavesdropping on the conversations from the balcony, smiles contentedly. Everything is going according to plan, as planned. His reputation has not been shaken. Even before the divorce, thanks to his faithful servant Albert, the man learned that the girl was spending her time in a hotel with a supposed bodyguard. Oscar consoles himself with the thought that this guy will probably leave Milena when he finds out that she was left without her status and money after the divorce. At the ball, it is announced that a nobleman from the Balthus family has arrived. Those present whisper among themselves, since the old count's wife and children died, he has stopped appearing in public. And in general, his health has deteriorated greatly. But to everyone's surprise, instead of the old count, Milena, now Countess Balthus, showed up at the reception. The Lucchese Club is the largest in the capital. It would not be an exaggeration to say that not a single public event in the world of politics, economics, and fashion takes place without the participation of Lucchese and his visitors. Visiting this establishment is a great way to advertise yourself without the help of newspapers. Upon learning that Count Balthus was a member of this club, Milena believes that this is the perfect opportunity for her debut. But the girl forgot that Oscar is also a member of Lucchese. Although it is unpleasant for her to see her ex's face, the main character understands that if she is going to continue to move in the upper circles of society, then she cannot avoid meeting him. One of the visitors is the first to ask Milena what happened to Frederick Balthus, her uncle. With great sadness, the girl reports the death of Count Balthus. He did not want his death to be widely known in the capital, so only members of his family knew about his funeral. Another of his wishes was to appoint Milena as hereditary countess. Looking from the balcony at how the other nobles communicate with the countess, Oscar cannot believe that his ex-wife has led him around by the nose. She had made him believe that she was afraid of his influence, and she herself was constantly disappearing. Now it became clear that she had been visiting Frederick. Moreover, it becomes obvious to the Duke why she suddenly started talking about Serena and the divorce. Not only did she receive an inheritance from Count Balthus, but she also forced him to pay her alimony. Oscar is burning with anger when one of the nobles approaches him. He asks the man if he really didn't know about her inheritance. He was about to snap at him for asking stupid questions, but the Duke remembered that he was talking to Lord Lem, and at the Lucchese Club no less. He needed to control himself. Oscar lies to him that he knew what was going on, not wanting to admit that he was tricked by his own ex-wife. Having apologized to his friend, the man confidently descends the stairs to Milena. Seeing them nearby, the nobles standing around actively whisper among themselves. When he meets her face to face, Oscar jokingly tells Milena not to worry because he doesn't dislike her. The Duke sarcastically adds that the girl must go south since Count Balthus had an orange farm there, but the ex-wife replies that the Count bequeathed her to remain in the capital. However, Oscar is confident that the nobles will quickly lose interest. Curiosity about her person is caused only by the death of the Count, whose title she inherited. However, to everyone's surprise, Milena says that she plans to go into the theater business since Frederick owned the capital's Sandro Theater, which she wants to make popular. She publicly declares that she will not steal any secrets of the Cridwell Theater because when she was married, her husband did not allow her to participate in family affairs. The other nobles discuss aloud with condemnation the fact that Oscar, it turns out, deprived his wife of the rights to manage the common business. Looking at the people around her, Milena realizes that the others took her statement as a declaration of war on the Cridwell Theater. Everyone knows how this theater achieved success. Oscar's father, Kieran, managed to make Princess Edwina, the daughter of a king suffering from depression, laugh. Seeing that going to the theater had a beneficial effect on his daughter's health, the king spared nothing for the theater and provided it with great financial support. Soon after Edwina, other aristocrats began going to the theater. The theater became a hotspot for actors as well. And not only for them, later, the best capital screenwriter Jacob Hennessy and the talented director Dahlia Portman began working at the theater. Although competing with such a successful theater is a dangerous undertaking, Milena does not lose hope. Oscar reproaches his ex-wife in front of everyone because she has no experience in managing a theater, and she mistakenly believes that it is easy. The crowd murmurs approvingly. The Duke has every chance of winning this bet. The Countess responds to the man's next attack with a quote. Oscar's face turns pale as the girl quotes his own father, the late Earl of Cridwell, who believed that culture influences the beneficial development of not only an individual, but an entire nation. An adult man with a beard and pince-nez is watching Milena from the balcony. There is a slight smile on his face. But the main character doesn't pay attention to this. She is more surprised by how Oscar's face changed when his father was mentioned. It seems to her that the man's reaction is more like shame than resentment for the fact that the girl is trying to put him in his place with her own father's words. Milena is genuinely surprised that Oscar is somehow ashamed of his own father. But she is distracted from further reflection by a voice from behind. The man in pince-nez who comes down the stairs turns out to be the Duke of Lopez. The Countess quickly bows respectfully. She considers it an honor that the president of the Lucchese Club himself has paid attention to her. Despite his smile, the girl understands that he is on Oscar's side. Lopez tells Milena that although Sandro's theater is a cozy place, she has a lot of work to do on it. He is also concerned that the theater does not have its own scriptwriter and director, but the main character replies that she has ready-made original stories that she will be happy to share with the public. Lopez is not relenting. He wants to know if Milena has an acting troupe. This time the girl doesn't get lost. She intrigues everyone by saying that they might see a familiar face on stage. A shocked Oscar realizes that it's Katerina. This time, addressing Duke Cridwell, the club president says that he will look forward to the new production in Sandro with interest. Oscar can only grit his teeth as he watches Milena being compared to Kieran, his father. Returning home, the man immediately calls his deputy and demands that he sign a contract with Katerina at all costs. The deputy timidly replies that he will take care of the matter immediately tomorrow, but despite the late hour, Oscar demands to contact the actress right now. To any objections from the employee, the Duke responds by saying that Hennessy will write a grand play, especially for Katerina, and Oscar himself will give her a huge basket of flowers. The deputy asks why the boss fired Miss Blanche in the first place, but the Duke only hangs up, recalling how naively he believed that the theater would be successful without her. He must not allow the actress to be lured to Milena's theater under any circumstances. Malena, meanwhile, is squeezed like a lemon. Returning home, she falls face down on the sofa, exhausted. The girl understands that she went too far at the reception because Lopez is a picky critic and it will be difficult to impress him with an ordinary play. At this time, Loche appears behind the door. He asks the lady for permission to enter. The young man's shyness touches Malena deeply. She wonders if he was this shy before he lost his memory. The young man reports to Malena that he has contacted Katerina Blanche, but she needs time to think. The actress told Loche that Oscar's deputy had come to see her. The girl is worried. She is sure that the director of the Cridwell Theatre has probably set very favorable conditions for her. Sitting down on his knee in front of her, Loche takes Malena's hands and calms her down. Katerina seems to really dislike Oscar, so he believes that luck will be on their side. The next day, Malena and Loche meet with Katerina, who indignantly hands the guests the morning edition of the newspaper. On the main page is a portrait of Malena. The girl, although upset in her soul, but without unnecessary negative emotions, answers the actress that she has already managed to read the article. But Miss Blanche cannot understand such calmness of her interlocutor, knowing the contents of this article. Journalists turned her statement from yesterday at the reception upside down. Supposedly, Malena mockingly believes that theatrical business is a mere trifle, that even she can handle it. Moreover, Katerina admits that Oscar offered her 3% of ticket sales if she returned, as well as the leading role in a biopic written by Jacob Hennessy. However, she is deeply upset that the man does this only because he has competitors. The actress emotionally responds that she is not a dog that runs to your leg when you beckon it with your hand. Admitting that she hates Oscar for the way he treated her, Katerina tells Malena that she will agree to work in her theater if she can wipe the smile off her former director's face. The main character takes her interlocutor by the hand, promising to take revenge on him. Katerina sincerely believes her words. They shake hands and the actress signs a contract with Malena. The Countess asks Loche to call her a carriage, but notices the upset on his face. Returning to the hotel, she asks what upset the young man so much, since the negotiations were successful. The bodyguard reluctantly admits that he is offended that she does not see any use in him because he can help her. But when Malena tries to understand what he means, the young man sheepishly retreats from her room, leaving the confused lady alone. Although she is puzzled by the behavior of her bodyguard, she cannot help but be touched by how shy and reserved he is. Suddenly, a call comes from Countess Balthus's butler, Dylan. He brings good news. The renovation of the mansion is mostly finished, and the lady can no longer live in the hotel, but fully move into her new home. Malena hurries to share this good news with Loche. She calls his room on the phone and tells him that he can pack his things. Having changed her clothes, Malena, with a suitcase in her hand, meets Loche in the corridor. He is no longer in such a bad mood, so the girl decides to play a joke on him. In a stern tone, she tells him that her personal bodyguard must remain calm in any situation and not blush at the sight of his mistress. As expected, he becomes embarrassed again and promises to improve, to which the main character smiles. Dylan meets them outside with a prepared carriage, promising to escort them safely to the mansion. Suddenly, Loche, in accordance with the rules of etiquette, extends his hand to Malena. The carriage is a bit high, and the Countess might need help. As the girl had requested earlier, the bodyguard's face showed complete severity and concentration. Arriving at the Balthus family mansion, Malena cannot contain her delight. Frederick's once abandoned mansion sparkles with beauty. Dylan, however, apologizes for the fact that the renovations are not yet complete and promises that the surrounding gardens will be restored soon. At the threshold of the estate, all of Malena's new servants, butlers, and governesses await her with humble bows. This picture almost brings tears to her eyes. During the entire time she lived with Oscar, all his servants followed only the orders of their master, ignored and avoided her. In her mind, she promises them that she will do everything to ensure that her subordinates are proud to serve Countess Balthus. Passing by the servants, the girl feels safe, because these people will always be faithful to her, while Loche will most likely leave her when his memory returns. But now she is happy to see him next to her. The girl invites the bodyguard to their new home. However, first she asks him to wait outside the room. Malena needs to discuss something important with Dylan first. Left alone, Loche cannot help but reflect on the fact that although he understands why the girl asked him to move away, he again feels unnecessary, just as he did at the meeting with Katerina. If Malena knew about his feelings, she would probably write it all off as his amnesia. But Loshe only truly feels at home when he is with her. The young man clenches his fists. He is afraid of what will happen to him when his memories return. Outside the window, he hears many heavy steps. The young man goes to the window to look out into the street. In the courtyard of the estate, he sees soldiers in uniform training. Apparently, these are the new guards of the lady. Looking at the guards, Loshe realizes that his services as a bodyguard will no longer be needed. After all, unlike Katarina and Dylan, he does not perform any unique function. Meanwhile, the captain of the guard has finished giving instructions. He notes to himself that, contrary to rumors about Malena, she promises a fairly large salary. Surprised by such a high salary, he can only fantasize about how much her personal bodyguard must be getting. The captain hears footsteps behind him and sees Loshe approaching. Mistaking him for one of the guards, he scolds the young man for being late. On closer inspection, however, the man sees that the young man is not one of them, although his build and gait indicate that he is a man with experience. The chief of the guard introduces himself as Captain Jack Rogers of the Steel Shield Guild. Jack asks Loshe what guild he belongs to which the man replies with the name of his mistress, not a muscle moving on his face. The Steel Shield Guild is responsible for security and protection. Due to the fact that they often work for aristocrats, the mercenaries are quite polite and courteous. However, like all mercenaries, they are driven primarily by material gain. As he shakes Roger's hand, Loshe thinks that he would not trust Malin to such people. Having answered the captain of the guard that he is the personal bodyguard of Countess Balthus, the mercenaries standing nearby begin to laugh at him, hinting that Loshe is not their equal. After asking his subordinates to leave the young man alone, Jack puts his hand on Loshe's shoulder with a smile and expresses doubt that with such a frail physique, he can protect Malena. The young man bites his lip in anger. He is full of desire to put the mercenaries in their place. At this time, Malena and Dylan come to the noise in the yard. The latter is especially outraged by the violation of the silence. Meanwhile, Loshe demands that Captain Rogers show him the most powerful mercenary among his men. The guards laugh as they push a red-haired boy named Billy towards him. He is already bored in the line and is grinning as he prepares to spar with Malena's bodyguard. Not even a minute passes before the mercenary gets punched in the chest. The guard falls to the ground, exhausted, and those around him can't even believe the speed of Loshe's blow. Someone whispers that he must have used magic. Ignoring the conversation, Loshe asks his next opponent to challenge him. When Malena and the butler arrive at the source of the noise, they find the bodyguard effortlessly throwing the guards aside. The lady is intrigued by what could have provoked Loshe to such a reaction, and Dylan demands an immediate explanation of what is happening. But the girl carefully touches the butler with her hand. She asks him not to interfere and let her see what happens next. Having defeated another opponent, Loshe, standing with his back to the random witnesses of his sparring, orders the next guard to come forward to fight. But only Captain Rogers remains on his feet. Jack falls to his knees and begs forgiveness for not recognizing the young man as a master of close combat. Seeing what is happening, Dylan immediately apologizes to the lady. The mercenaries he hired did not live up to their rank. He plans to fire the guards and advertise for new ones. But Malena stops her. She thinks to herself that she needs exactly the capital's mercenaries, and that Dylan has probably hired the best mercenaries available here. She praises Loshe for his skills and informs him that he will now be in charge of the estate's defense and security. Malena then asks Captain Rogers if he has learned his lesson. When he apologizes, she informs him that he and his steel shields will now be under Loshe's direct command and will follow his orders as if they were her own. It would seem that the last thing the main character tells the captain is that she has heard that the Steel Shields are the strongest guild in the capital. Jack replies that this is true, but Malena says without a doubt that she could not personally verify this because the entire squad was defeated by one person. She reduces their wages by half. In response to the captain's protests, the girl suggests that he and his men try to find new work. But he does not promise that he will not tell the rest of the nobles about the reason for their dismissal. The cornered captain has no choice but to accept the countess's demands. Returning together to the mansion, Malena asks the young man what the guards did to cause such a reaction in him. She promises to fire them all immediately if they did anything to offend him, but Loshe shakes his head. He is glad to have the opportunity to command them, but even more glad that he managed to show the mercenaries who protects the lady and is always at her left hand. The main character thanks the young man in response for helping her to reduce the costs of the security garrison. Meanwhile, Oscar visits Serena, who is already living in a new house. The girl makes a remark that the man has not visited her for a long time, to which the Duke only replies irritably that he was busy with business. She tries to hug him, but feels afraid. Oscar has come in a bad mood before, but today something is definitely wrong with him. Despite the fact that he divorced his wife because of her, the girl no longer feels like the one for whom Creedwell could move mountains before. Moreover, after the divorce, Oscar did not visit her more often. Serena moves away from her lover in fear and tries to look into his eyes, but they are absolutely cold. Without saying another word, the Duke turns and walks away. He is angry that even after the divorce he cannot stop thinking about Malena, even when he looks into the face of his mistress. The thought comes to mind that the reason for all his troubles and his main weakness is Serena. The man thinks about eliminating his mistress, but Oscar decides to put it off for later and not rush. Instead, the Duke tries to convince himself that Malena must still be pining for him, since she used to watch his every move and be faithful. The man consoles himself with the thought that his ex-wife must now be suffering and regretting what she did. That evening, the main character is heading home to the mansion when her ex-husband suddenly blocks her way. She, without unnecessary emotion, asks the man to let her pass and step aside. Oscar is again struck by the fact that there is no hint of remorse on her face. But he still has hope. Perhaps Malena is deliberately pretending to be distant to attract his attention. In an attempt to win her attention, the Duke offers to help the girl with the theater business. Who else but the director of the Grand Theater of Creedwell can help a newcomer in this business? He literally extends a helping hand to his ex-wife, expecting her to immediately melt and rush into his arms. But instead, the girl just crosses her arms over her chest. She doesn't need help. Moreover, she asks him to stop such attempts at flirting. Humiliated and insulted, Oscar's face turns red with anger. Malena replies that she was joking and mockingly says that it seems the Duke is no longer capable of understanding jokes. Oscar asks Losha to leave, afraid that he might overhear business secrets, but Malena replies that her bodyguard is loyal to her and that she really doesn't need help. Her ex-husband has invested enough in her business. The man doesn't understand what she's talking about, but the main character reminds him of the alimony he paid during the divorce on his own initiative, humiliating him even more. Finally, the Duke makes way for her, after which the girl and her bodyguard walk past the confused Creedwell as if nothing had happened. Without turning around to look at her former lover, Malena asks him to try to show her the honor worthy of Countess Balthus next time. Losh turned around and glared menacingly at Oscar. Beside himself with anger, the man no longer intends to flirt and seek the favor of his ex. Now his only desire is to trample her. He reassures himself that Katerina alone is not enough for her to succeed. Without a good script, her theater is doomed to bankruptcy. Oscar makes it his mission not to let Malena take the other members of his theater troupe away. As he walks away through the city streets, he threatens to make the girl regret rejecting him. Meanwhile, work is in full swing in Jacob Hennessy's studio, which feels more like a machine room than a creative workshop. The scripts are not written by the maestro himself, but by his apprentices, to whom he gives the theme and outlines the work plan. Oscar, who came here, doesn't care about these details, though. The main thing for him is to get a script that pays for itself on time. In the workshop, he meets Hennessy. The Duke hands the screenwriter a new contract. The man notices that his salary has been raised and wonders if such a bonus will hit his budget. Oscar says with a smile that he has cut back on staff, firing all the old and unclaimed actors. But Jacob doesn't have to worry. All the people Oscar wants to keep have already signed new contracts, so the screenwriter can fully concentrate on his main task. Among the apprentices, a man notices a young girl wearing glasses who suddenly stands up from the table, getting ready to leave. Hennessy doesn't remember her name. He says the turnover at work is due, in his opinion, to young people who think too highly of themselves and their work. The quitting girl sighs with relief as she crosses the threshold of the workshop. Having made an indecent gesture, she wishes Jacob to go bankrupt as soon as possible for paying pennies and giving him a ton of work. Soon a carriage appears near the workshop. The girl asks to be taken to Countess Balthus. Arriving at her estate, screenwriter Becky Dartnell bows and thanks Malena for accepting her. The Countess admits that she decided to invite Becky after reading her manuscript. The scriptwriter almost starts to cry. Jacob didn't even know her name, since he doesn't consider his students to be people. The young girl tells Malena that before leaving the workshop, she ran into Duke Cridwell, who brought Hennessy a new contract. The main character smiles at the realization that Oscar is predictably in a panic trying to keep the theater's top talents. Screenwriter Jacob Hennessy, director Dahlia Portman, and Nina Ford, the current prima donna. Meanwhile, Becky shyly asks if Countess Balthus will really pay her on a monthly basis for the number of characters in the script. Malena at first thinks that the girl does not agree with the terms of the contract, but it turns out to be the opposite. She is surprised that the Countess is offering such heavenly conditions. At least the main character is glad to know that she treats her employees better than they do at the Cridwell Theater. Becky, meanwhile, is beaming with happiness. She says out loud that Malena is not at all what others describe her as, after which she immediately apologizes. Realizing that she had gone on and on, she quickly changed the subject and handed the Countess the completed work, the first 3 chapters of the play. The main character is genuinely surprised because she told her the plot only a few days ago. It seems that Becky Dartnell could become a talented screenwriter. Malena likes the manuscript. It is interesting and written in a lively but elegant language. Becky says she made the main character the way her client asked for him. Mischievous but charming. The story that Malena decides to adapt is Pinocchio. After all, in this world, there is not a single production where the main characters are children, and the plot itself is not a novel or a heroic epic. In her past life, the main character staged plays for children, so she remembers the plot of Pinocchio, a fairy tale by Carlo Collodi from the late 19th century, including the characters' lines, by heart. However, Becky doubts the Countess's decision to give the role of the main character, the doll boy, to Katharina Blanche. And although Malena is full of confidence, the scriptwriter is not accustomed to the idea of a play for children with a child as the main character, who will be played by the capital's first beauty. But the main character understands the reason for Becky's uncertainty. In this world, children under 14 are not allowed into theaters. The Countess learned of this fact while studying the market. The first to ban children from entering was the Cridwell Grand Theatre, and other theaters were quick to follow suit. All this was done to maintain the prestige and image of the theater. Although Kieran Cridwell made special rooms for children, under Oscar's leadership, these rooms were converted into additional halls. So a business aimed at children should be a real goldmine. But plays for children attract even adults. She is already anticipating the excitement that will surround Pinocchio. Oscar will definitely be taken aback by the fact that Malena would stage such a work. But Becky is still not sure of success. Katharina will have to play a child, and the Countess has not yet begun to select actors for the other roles. The main character asks to trust her. She is sure that with such a talented screenwriter and a wonderful actress, they will definitely succeed. However, Katharina is shocked when she reads the script. She exclaims that she could never play a doll boy, and this role is clearly not for her. Katharina insists that she is an actress, not a clown, and has never played such roles at the Cridwell Theatre. But Malena believes that this is their advantage. Oscar does not have such productions, and if people want to see a beautiful actress, they will go to him in any case. The main character is sure that Katharina is not interested in being a beauty, but in playing a role that will make such an impression on the viewer that he will never forget it. Knowing that the former prima donna decides to return to the stage and in such an unusual role will certainly make the audience buy a ticket and enjoy her performance. And since the audience at the theater will be different from that at the Bolshoi Theater, Miss Blanche herself must look different. According to Malena, it is possible to play funny roles without damaging one's reputation if Katharina plays them proudly and without embarrassment. The Countess grabs the actress by the shoulders and, looking into her eyes, asks her to show everyone that Katharina Blanche deserves to play on the theater stage. Before leaving, the main character tells the girl that she can, of course, refuse the role. In 3 days, there will be an audition for a supporting role, and if she decides to do it, Malena will be waiting for her there. Duke Lopez smokes a pipe in his office. He has heard rumors about the restructuring of the Bolshoi Theater. Having seen Kieran in life, Lopez sometimes doubts that Oscar is really his own blood. While he understands that in any business it is important to cut costs and increase profits, the Duke cannot help but feel gloomy at the thought of people losing their jobs. The butler who brought the tea tells his master the rumor that Anthony Brogo has also been laid off. The Duke, judging by his face, is quite shocked by this news. The man can't believe Oscar fired a man who was supported by Kieran Creedwell and Lopez's own father. Once upon a time in the past, he was the most outstanding actor of the Bolshoi Theater, whose talent overshadowed any of his acting partners. Seeing his master's distress, the servant suggests that perhaps he was fired precisely because of his advanced age. There is an unspoken rule at the Cridwell Grand Theater that all actors must maintain a perfect appearance. For this reason, they are forced to leave the stage when they reach a certain age. As Oscar himself says, anything that cannot shine on its own should not be illuminated by the spotlight. Lopez bowed his head sadly. He knows he won't convince Oscar to take Anthony back. Unfortunately, the theater, while worthy of praise, does not reflect the real world. Deciding to go out for some fresh night air, Lopez walks thoughtfully down the street, thinking. Although he and Anthony are from different backgrounds, they are very close, so the Duke will not have a clue how to help his friend. On his way, he comes across an announcement about an upcoming audition at the Balthus Theater. Lopez is pleasantly surprised that Melena's words were not empty. Taking a closer look at the ad, the Duke discovers an unexpected detail. All actors, regardless of age and gender, can come to the audition. 3 days later, Melena and Becky sit in an empty auditorium as the jury, with just 10 minutes left until the auditions. Although a large number of people came to the review, Katerina was not among them. The scriptwriter is noticeably nervous. She doubts that the actress will come, but the Countess remains calm and asks to wait a little longer. And indeed, at the last minute the doors to the hall open. Miss Blanche joins them, apologizing for being late. She tells the main character that she saw passion for the craft in her eyes. Just an hour ago, Katerina stood in front of the mirror at home, deep in thought. Accustomed to enthusiastic applause from the gentlemen, the actress cannot imagine herself in such a comical and awkward role. She is afraid that she will become a laughingstock. But suddenly she has an epiphany. Why does she think that only beautiful things can be on stage? This is what she used to think as an actress at the Bolshoi Theater. The girl realizes that Oscar imposed this way of thinking on her, preventing her from fully revealing herself as an actress. Full of determination, Katerina realizes that the most important thing in acting is to bring joy to people. The girl tells Melena with a smile that it is important for her to see the actors who will play with her. The Countess invites the participant number 1 onto the stage. After some time, the jury members find themselves in an awkward position. Most of the actors do not have sufficient talent. The only thing that pleases Melena is that many roles in Pinocchio are episodic. However, even the smallest role can have great weight. Take, for example, the same Giuseppe, the creator and father of Pinocchio. Although he appears in the story only briefly, at the culmination of the story, it is thanks to him that the main character turns from a hooligan doll into a real boy. The person playing the role of Giuseppe must have sufficient acting skills so that Katerina does not completely overshadow him on stage. Melena turns to the actress, asking if she liked any of the actors, but the girl is clearly disappointed with what she saw, naming an almost random participant in the audition. The main character worries that she needs to find a compromise and lower the bar, otherwise neither the actors themselves nor the audience will like the production. Declaring a break, emotionally and physically exhausted, Melena goes outside to catch her breath. Discouraged by the lack of suitable candidates, the girl is even thinking about taking on the role of both director and actress, even though this is too much. A child's voice is heard from the side. The Countess turns around and sees an elderly man and a little girl standing near the entrance. Holding an audition notice in her hands, the granddaughter asks her grandfather to take part, to which he refuses, saying that he is no longer old enough. The Countess hears the old man addressing the girl, Lydia, as saying that only beautiful things can be on stage, and no matter what is stated in the advertisement, no one will be happy to see him at the audition. Calling out to them, Melena says that she is the Countess recruiting for the troupe. The little girl immediately blossoms. Taking her grandfather's hand, she introduces him to Milena as the famous actor Anthony Brogo. Clearly embarrassed by the situation, the old man justifies himself by saying that he told his granddaughter about his former youth and that she is now full of enthusiasm to find him a job. Ignoring their subsequent squabble, the main character notes to herself Anthony's pleasant voice and pronunciation. Interrupting their argument, Milena says that it was not for nothing that she indicated in the ad that age was not important, because she is primarily looking for talent. Moreover, she needs someone to play the role of the older man. Lydia happily says that she was right. Invited to the audition, Lydia and her grandfather, whom she is leading by the arm, follow the Countess inside. Sometime later, it was the turn of the last contender. But Becky whispered in the lady's ear that the actor looked completely exhausted. Milena doesn't understand what she's talking about, because she saw this old man an hour ago, and he was in great physical shape. However, Anthony appears before them. The main character can hardly believe what she sees. There really is no will to live in his eyes, and he himself looks like a squeezed lemon. However, a minute later, she is surprised to realize that Anthony is acting out a scene from the climax of the play, Giuseppe trying to eat raw fish after being swallowed by a shark. In the story, the old man is reunited with his son, Pinocchio, whom he has not seen for a long time. Despite hunger and fear, hope appears on his face. The girl is truly delighted with his acting. He was not afraid to take on one of the most difficult scenes in the play. Moreover, despite the fact that he is alone on stage, his performance is so convincing that it seems as if Pinocchio is really standing nearby at that moment. The actor's sincere performance truly captivates Milena and makes her feel the full range of emotions. The only thing she finds hard to understand is why the old man was so reluctant to audition. The seated Katerina, however, seems more shocked by the old man's performance than the Countess herself. She exclaims in a whisper that she knows him. She tells Milena that Anthony used to work at the Creedwell Grand Theatre, but she had no idea he could act. The actress admits that the troupe did not treat him very kindly. Brogo was not given any roles, which is why other actors believed that he was receiving his salary unfairly. With bitterness and shame, Katerina confesses to the surprised Countess that there are no roles for elderly people in the Creedwell Theatre, because the stage is a fantasy world where old age has no place. The main character immediately recalls Anthony's dialogue with his granddaughter. Now she understands his uncertainty and the phrase that there is only room for beautiful things on stage. Be that as it may, all three members of the jury unanimously agree that the old man should be cast as Giuseppe. Katerina adds that she can't wait to meet him on stage. The first day of rehearsal has arrived. Countess Balthus, accompanied by her bodyguard, is walking down a street in the capital. At a table in a summer cafe sit two young ladies, loudly discussing Milena and her statement at a social event. One of them, a freckled, long-haired brunette, openly mocks the Countess. Milena, who happens to be nearby, recognizes them as frequent guests of the Creedwell estate. Despite the presence of the Countess nearby, the aristocrat continues to laugh. Surely Katerina Blanche already regrets joining her troupe. The main character guesses that she is deliberately pretending that Milena is not around. She was probably sent by Oscar to make his ex-wife show anger and attack the girl in broad daylight. Finally, the girl pretends that she has only just noticed the presence of the Countess nearby and greets her as if nothing had happened. Two can play this game. Instead of ignoring the obvious provocation, Milena decides to respond to it in her own way. Sitting down at their table, the Countess says with a smile that she is glad to know that they are discussing her career as a theater director because she is eager to hear their opinion. The gossip girl was speechless, not expecting such a reaction from a woman with a reputation as an aggressive fool. The main character smiles and asks if they are gossiping about her theater. The girls brush it off, saying that she just made something up for herself and shouldn't take everything to heart, even if her theater is going through hard times right now. But the main character says that she is not offended by criticism, but Oscar Creedwell might be offended by slander, because he recently offered her a profitable collaboration, and therefore, by insulting her theater, they insult his choice. However, Milena amuses the shocked gossips by assuring them that she turned down her ex-husband because she hopes for a fair competition. Further conversation is interrupted by Losha. He hurries to remind his mistress that it is time to go, and the first rehearsal is about to begin. As she walks away, Malena smiles and thinks that even if the young ladies don't believe her, rumors will spread quickly anyway to spite Oscar. The main character is slightly late for rehearsal and is worried that the actors probably haven't started without her and will have to be rushed. But to her surprise, Anthony and Katerina are in the center of the room acting out a scene between Pinocchio and the fairy. Moreover, the old man took on the role of the fairy. Despite this, he plays so well that you don't even feel any dissonance. While trying to figure out why Anthony is playing the fairy, Malena notices the other actors watching their performance closely and making notes on the script. Two professional actors decide to show some newcomers how to act, and both of them act so well, as if they had been performing together their whole lives. What's more, they were able to memorize 90 minutes of the script in just 2 days, an incredible achievement. And Katerina in the image of Pinocchio, even without makeup, just by acting, looks like a boy. The main character cannot believe that Oscar kicked out such talented actors from his theater. When those present notice her presence, Malena approaches Katerina and praises her acting, adding that she has room to grow. She needs to be more like a doll. And she almost brings old Anthony to tears by throwing herself into his arms and telling him that it is too early for him to leave the stage. Everyone is happy, only Loesch watches everything from the side with sadness. Sometime later, the rehearsal comes to an end. Everyone leaves. Malena, although tired, is glad that everything went much better than she expected. Suddenly, the bodyguard picks her up without asking. Loesch tells the lady that he will carry it home to her in his arms, since she has developed blisters from spending the entire rehearsal on her feet. Arriving home, the young man washes the girl's feet in the bath while she sits on the sofa. With a serious expression on his face, Loesch asks her not to hide her pain from him. She assures him that her chafed feet don't hurt at all, but immediately gasps when he touches her feet. Looking at her bodyguard, the main character notices that he is not at all a helpless puppy, as he seemed to her at first glance. Over the past few days, he has clearly matured. The girl tells Loesch that he may turn out to be a nobleman of higher status than she is, and he should not humiliate himself in front of her like that. But he immediately replies that even if he turns out to be the heir to the throne, being close to Malena and helping her does not seem humiliating to him. Early the next morning, Loesch goes down to the hallway, where Dylan meets him. An uninvited guest has arrived at the mansion and demands the countess, but she is still asleep, and the butler does not want to wake her. That uninvited guest turns out to be Oscar Creedwell. The young man is outraged by the rumors that his ex-wife has spread about him and demands that she be brought in immediately. The head butler only bows to the Duke, but asks him to either come later or wait until Malena wakes up, since he came without warning. This answer only angers Oscar, for the servant dared to contradict the nobleman. The latter was already raising his hand to strike. But Loesch intercepts his hand and scolds the negligent man that he shouldn't beat people every time he's unhappy with something. The guest is outraged that some bodyguard dares to touch Duke Cridwell, but Loesch calmly replies that he is neither his master nor his lord. Realizing that he will not live to see Malena, Oscar turns to the door, adding that Countess Balthus will answer for such disobedience. Left alone, Dylan sighs. He does not understand how the lady could get involved with such an unpleasant person. After these words, Loesch involuntarily fantasizes about how if he were Malena's husband, he would carry such a girl in his arms and do everything to make her happy. The servant notices that the bodyguard is daydreaming about something with a blush on his cheeks and tells him about it. The embarrassed Loesch assures him that everything is fine. Meanwhile, the Duke left the Balthus estate, beside himself with anger. He threatens the girl and her servants that they will pay for ignoring him. Oscar decides that Dylan should answer in court for his disrespect to him, after which he brutally deals with the bodyguard, thereby causing Malena to suffer excruciatingly. Her ex-husband casts a hateful glance at her estate. The girl does not have much time left to enjoy the carefree life of a count. Meanwhile, the main character lazily stretches in bed. Upon learning that Loesch had driven Oscar away, she laughs, wiping away her tears. But the bodyguard is not so positive. He warns the lady that before leaving he muttered that he would make her pay. Turning serious, Malena asks Loesch what he could do in her ex-husband's place. Since Oscar has connections in the media, he would probably schedule the production for the same day as the premiere of Pinocchio, widely advertising it and offering free tickets to his influential acquaintances. The girl is pleasantly impressed by the bodyguard's answer and says that the advantage is on their side because they can guess what Creedwell will do, but he does not know what they can do. The main character asks the young man not to worry about Oscar. They should concentrate on the theater while her ex-husband is trying to knead water in a mortar. With these words, they go to work at the theater. The rehearsal is in full swing. The actors are acting out a scene where the fox and the cat are trying to convince Pinocchio to go to the land of fools. And although the acting of other actors has improved, Anthony strictly guides them and gives them useful advice and criticism. Malena is certainly glad that she has such a responsible actor-perfectionist in the troupe. Becky adds that she believes the acting skills of the Balthus Theatre Company are every bit as good as those of the Creedwell Theatre. After this, the girls go to work in the office. They have to find a production designer for their performance. With the amount of work and people that need to be found, Malena laments that they cannot hire a magician for the theater and create the right atmosphere with the help of magic. The scriptwriter hastens to remind the lady that even Creedwell does not have magicians at his disposal, because they are all in the service of the royal family. Kieran Creedwell once even tried to get permission to hire a magician into his troupe, but was refused. The fact is that Oscar's grandfather, Decio Creedwell, blinded by the thirst for power, tried to usurp the throne. His son Kieran was sent into exile, but was able to restore the family's honor by making Princess Edwina laugh. Even if they could hire a mage, it would clearly be beyond their means. Better not to think about what could have been, but to focus on the current problems. However, there is so much to do that Malena does not even have the opportunity to go to Lucchese's club to find out about the latest gossip, or to watch the actors rehearse. Dylan enters the office. He holds a beautiful bouquet of blue roses with an envelope. The servant tells the lady that a certain gentleman sent them along with a letter. After reading it, the girl is surprised to discover that it was sent by Duke Lopez himself. Lamenting that she has not been seen in Lucchese for a long time, he personally invites her to his estate. The girl kept thinking that Lopez was unkindly disposed towards her since he was Oscar's brother-in-law, and he on the contrary was doing her a great honor by sending such an invitation. Malena feels a sudden surge of strength and motivation to work even harder on the production. While the girl is pondering over the answer, Dylan tells Losha that a certain man sent her the bouquet, which clearly offends him. The girl, meanwhile, calls her bodyguard to go with her to the reception. He replies with a smile that he is always ready. But Malena notices a change in his mood, and this puzzles her. On Monday, they go to meet with Lopez. The Duke meets them in his room with a pipe in his hand. Tea is already served on the table. The main character asks Losha to leave them alone and wait outside. Upon learning that the man who sent her the flowers was Count Lopez himself, which Malena confirmed, he begins to smile happily. Malena is puzzled by such a sudden change in mood. Before leaving, the young man gives the Countess a box, which the girl, when they are alone, gives to Lopez. Inside, the Duke finds a beautiful dark wood cane, but assures Malena that he has not called her to exchange gifts, but to express his gratitude for her assistance. Countess Balthus is puzzled. She does not remember providing any services to the Duke, but Lopez quickly clears up the situation. The girl has hired Anthony Brogo to join his troupe, and he considers it a wise decision. He admits that Anthony is an old friend of his, so he was worried that he was out of work. He suspects that Oscar fired him, although the actor himself said that he made this decision. Malena immediately remembers Lydia, the little girl who was with Anthony on the day of the audition. Holding the announcement in her hands, she told her grandfather that a certain Duke had told her about him. This Duke turned out to be Mr. Lopez himself. With a smile, the elderly man says that Lydia is a very smart and good girl. The main character hurries to assure the Duke that she should thank him for the fact that such a talented actor got into their troupe. The Creedwell Theatre may be trying to keep up with the times, but the Balthus Theatre plans to continue what Kieran started and preserve the traditions he established. Changing the subject slightly, Lopez admits that Anthony shared with him the plot of the upcoming play. And the Duke, being a famous theater critic, is quite puzzled by the fact that Malena cast Katerina in the role of the boy doll and made him the main protagonist of the play. He fears that such a third-rate plot will destroy Balthus's theater, which offends the Countess. She hurries to justify herself by saying that she conceived the play for children and that she should not judge the performance so rudely without having seen it. But Lopez only warns the heroine. There is a reason why no one has ever managed to pull off such an idea. But the girl is inspired by the Duke's attention and asks him to wait for the finished result. Returning home, the Countess collapsed on the sofa. Loesch carefully fans her with sheets of paper and suggests she take a nap, but she has plans to attend a rehearsal. Interrupting her monologues about Katerina's acting, the young man tells her that she is too preoccupied with work and should rest. Feeling the bodyguard's cold hand on her forehead, Milena realizes that she didn't even notice how her temperature had risen. Trying to fight off sleep, she gets up and asks Loesch why his mood had changed so much earlier when he found out that the invitation was from Lopez. He admits that he thought the sender was some man who was trying to flirt and court her.